In the not-too-distant future, the most valuable cargo leaving Earth won't be headed to space. It will be coming from space. For centuries, we looked at the moon as a poetic object, a silent companion in the night sky that dictated our tides and inspired our myths. But that era of romanticism is dead. We are about to witness a fundamental shift where the moon ceases to be a symbol of exploration and becomes the engine of our solar system's economy. This is the chronicle of the next 125 years, a timeline that charts the most dangerous and lucrative transition in human history. It is a story of how a desolate, gray rock, bombarded by radiation and devoid of atmosphere, transformed into the industrial heart of humanity. From a resource war in the shadowed craters of the South Pole, to the first drop of rocket fuel sold in orbit, to the inevitable moment the moon stops asking Earth for permission. Year 2026, man returns to the moon. While the media focuses on the astronauts of Artemis 3, broadcasting high-definition feeds of flags being planted and dust being kicked up, the real mission is happening silently in the background. The U.S. deploys the Argyle Prospecting Rover, a machine that will never receive a ticker tape parade, yet its job is infinitely more critical than the human crew. Its mission isn't science, it is financial validation. The APR is sent to survey the permanently shadowed regions of the lunar South Pole, hunting for water ice that has been trapped there for billions of years. In the harsh calculus of spaceflight, this ice is not just water, it is hydrogen and oxygen, the chemical components of rocket fuel. This period is defined by an invisible, high-stakes battle for data, where the prize isn't the territory itself, but the verified maps of where the ice lies. The United States and its partners understand that the first nation to map the treasury owns the keys to the future. Year 2030, China's autonomous counterstrike. 3 years later, the monopoly ends when China executes a precision landing near the South Pole, shattering the illusion of Western dominance. However, their approach is radically different. Instead of a heavy, fragile human presence requiring life support and safety protocols, they deploy the Autonomous Construction Outpost. This facility prioritizes machine efficiency over human comfort, utilizing swarms of spider-like robots to sinter lunar regolith into hardened structures. This creates a stark contrast in philosophy, the American manpower approach versus the Chinese machine power approach. While American astronauts sleep, Chinese robots build, working tirelessly through the lunar night. By 2030, the moon is formally divided into two distinct zones of influence. And while the rivalry is respectful on the surface, the geopolitical implication is clear. The moon is large, but the prime real estate near the ice is terrifyingly limited, and the chessboard has been set. Year 2035, Shackleton and the first habitat. In 2035, the Artemis Alliance completes Shackleton, the first semi-permanent habitat located on the rim of the Shackleton crater. Powered by a commercial fission reactor brought up from Earth, this isn't the gleaming, spacious sci-fi city promised in movies. It is a rugged, utilitarian outpost, essentially a submarine in a vacuum designed to keep crews alive for grueling 6-month rotations. Life inside Shackleton is a constant battle against the physiological degradation of low gravity and the psychological toll of isolation. The air smells of ozone and recycled filtration, and the silence of the vacuum outside is contrasted by the constant hum of life support fans inside. Yet Shackleton represents a monumental pivot from camping to residency. It proves that we can sustain a life support loop off-world, forcing rivals to accelerate their timelines. The era of the flag-planting sprint is dead, and the era of the endurance run has begun. Year 2040. The single most important economic event in space history happens. After a decade of trial and error, both American and Chinese facilities successfully scale their on-site resource utilization technology. Massive electrolysis plants are now reliably converting lunar water ice into liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, creating high-test rocket propellant directly on the surface. The math is devastating for Earth-based launch providers because it is 20 times more energy efficient to launch fuel from the moon's low gravity than from Earth's deep gravity well. Suddenly, a mission to Mars doesn't require lifting a massive fuel tank from Florida. It just requires a rendezvous in lunar orbit to top up the tanks. The moon officially becomes the solar system's gas station, triggering a gold rush for orbital logistics contracts that floods the lunar sector with private capital. Year 2045, the Indian Prajna Industrial Hub. Just as the US and China lock horns over the ice fields, India changes the game by establishing the Prajna Industrial Hub. They realize that the moon offers a resource even more valuable than ice, the vacuum itself. Prajna bypasses the crowded polar regions to focus on manufacturing Zeblan fiber optics and high-purity semiconductors, materials that are impossible to perfect in Earth's gravity due to microscopic defects caused by convection. By utilizing the pristine vacuum and low gravity, India begins exporting cables that can transmit data 100 times faster than terrestrial glass. They aren't trying to dominate the military high ground, but rather the high-tech supply chain that powers Earth's digital economy. This forces the superpowers to pivot, realizing that military dominance means nothing if you don't control the manufacturing floor that builds the chips inside your missiles. Year 2055, Russia's Nizhny Outpost. Russia, leveraging its decades of experience with the Mir and ISS stations, carves out a specific, high-value niche with the Nizhny Outpost. This facility becomes the premier center for long-duration human health data and closed-loop life support engineering. While other nations focus on mining and manufacturing, the Russians focus on the biological limit of the human species. They conduct controversial but necessary research on radiation shielding, bone density retention, and the genetic effects of low gravity on successive generations of plants. While the US and China fight for resources, Russia sells the technology that keeps everyone alive. In a gold rush, Russia is selling the water canteens, monetizing the survival data that keeps crews healthy for multi-year stays, making them an indispensable partner to all blocks. Year 2065, the Lunar Transit Authority. By 2065, the sheer volume of traffic, including cargo drones, personnel shuttles, and mining hoppers, forces a bureaucratic evolution. The risk of a collision in lunar orbit has become too high, and a single crash could create a debris field that locks everyone on the surface. To prevent this, the Federated Earth States spearhead the creation of the Lunar Transit Authority. The US and China, initially resistant to ceding control, are forced by necessity to join this regulatory body. The LTA regulates orbital lanes, assigns fabrication rights, and manages active debris removal. The Wild West days are over, replaced by a regulated zone where safe trade is prioritized over old Earth grudges. The major powers still lead, but they now operate within a web of international law that they can no longer ignore. Year 2075. The mid-2075s mark the transition from base to city as humanity retreats from the surface. To escape the constant threat of cosmic radiation and micrometeoroids, all major blocks move their primary habitation underground, sealing vast lava tubes to create pressurized environments. These natural caverns are large enough to house skyscrapers, protected by hundreds of meters of basalt rock. The population surpasses 5,000 permanent residents, and the demographic shifts from military and scientific personnel to civilians. These are mechanics, botanists, administrators, and service workers. This generation, the first true lunar citizens, begins to develop a culture distinct from Earth. They view the moon not as a station, but as home, and the harsh environment fosters a communal reliance that transcends the national borders drawn on the surface. Year 2120, the Maglev transfer. Technological refinement continues with the perfection of the Lunar-Earth Maglev transfer system in 2120. This is a massive electromagnetic mass driver, a railgun miles long, capable of shooting cargo pods from the lunar surface into orbit without using a drop of chemical fuel. It represents the ultimate triumph of lunar engineering over the tyranny of the rocket equation. This system slashes the cost of lunar goods like platinum, titanium, and helium-3 to rock bottom. Earth, now resource-strained and energy-hungry, finds itself economically dependent on its own satellite to power its fusion reactors and build its electronics. The relationship flips. The colony is now the supplier and the homeworld is the consumer. The moon has become an economic fortress. Year 2135, the Geo-Fence crisis. But dependence breeds tension, and in 2135, the Geo-Fence crisis erupts in the Oceanus Procellarum region. A dispute over helium-3 mining rights escalates into a physical skirmish between FES and Chinese corporate security forces. It is the first armed conflict in space involving drone warfare and kinetic impactors. While non-fatal, the incident sends shockwaves through the system and reveals a terrifying truth. A war on the moon would starve Earth of energy, but it would kill everyone on the moon. One hull breach, one destroyed oxygen farm, and the colony dies. The fragile nature of their existence shocks the lunar population. The people of the moon realize that Earth's quarrels are an existential threat to their survival, and the sovereign lunar cities, once competitors, begin to look at each other as allies against the volatility of the blue planet. In 2150, the Lunar Citizens Assembly is formed, a legislative body that governs the autonomous settlements, legally distinct from terrestrial governments. This is not a violent revolution, but a cold economic severance. They control the fuel, they control the ports, and they control the gateway to the rest of the system. The moon is no longer an outpost, a mine, or a colony. It is a sovereign world with its own laws, its own culture, and its own future. The population, now in the tens of thousands, looks at Earth with affection, but not subservience. As the massive lunar ships depart for the outer planets, built in the low-gravity shipyards of the moon, they do so not as envoys of Earth, but as children of the moon. From a cold rock in the night sky to a thriving industrial heartland, the colonization of the moon is the story of how humanity learned to leave the cradle. It was built on the backs of competition, greed, and survival, eventually giving way to a new unified identity. The moon was never the final destination. It was the test. And having passed it, the solar system is finally open.